Yeah, thanks everyone here for joining the Unbounded Capital webinar today. Today, you'll be hearing from Dave, one of our partners, who on all these webinars, rather than getting a outside guest, is finally something that we have been talking about for years now, is happening in very large scale with Twitter. So we've already seen developments with our portfolio companies and kind of the ripple effects of this. So both for ourselves internally, we wanted to explore and research this, and we're going to be sharing a little bit of that with you today. So Dave will share a short little presentation, and as always, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, whether by raising your hand and then I will unmute you, or you can write in the chat for everyone to see, or you can just DM myself. So without further ado, take it away, Dave.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, as Zach mentioned, today we're talking about Elon Musk potentially eyeing micropayments for a feature he's adding to Twitter, which, if you're a frequent guest of Unbounded Capital webinars or you read our material, it's a use case that we're very familiar with. So it's great to see some validation and some very high, large scale validation. So here's the initial tweet that kind of kicked this off. A couple weeks ago, Elon tweeted, "Rolling out next month, the platform will allow media publishers to charge users on a per article basis with one click. This enables users who would not sign up for a monthly subscription to pay a higher per article price for when they want to read an occasional article. Should be a major win-win for both media orgs and the public." And we definitely agree. So like I said, if you're a frequent attendee of our webinars or you read our content, this should sound pretty familiar. Here's an image we mocked up a couple years ago outlining this kind of exact use case. So this is a specific upgrade to content monetization that we've kind of long envisioned and talked about. And our investments at Unbounded Capital focus largely on companies which provide the infrastructure for what we think is the ideal implementation of this type of user experience, in addition to other powerful business models that leverage micropayments. From our experience, we bring up this example quite a bit in conversation because it's just a very clear example of micropayments in action. Almost everyone, if not every single person anecdotally that I've talked to, prefers this system. So rather than, everyone has this experience of you find an article that looks interesting, you click on it, you get to the site, you've already read your 3 or 4 articles per month or whatever your free allowance is, and you get this annoying subscribe to XYZ publication pop-up, which prevents you from reading the rest of the article. At that point, you're probably unlikely to pull out your credit card and make another subscription to a new article. So most people kind of just churn at that point, find the information elsewhere. But it's an awful user experience. If you could, with one click, pay 10 cents, pay $1, whatever the price is, to read it, the conversion rate there would be, I think, incredibly high. And this is exactly what Elon mentioned in his post. So virtually everyone prefers this model to the ubiquitous subscription model. So what's the deal? Why don't we have this already today? The answer there is basically transaction fees. So what you see here in this image, this is the industry standard transaction fee scheme. So you pay a 30 cents fixed fee and then 2.9 or 3% of the purchase price. So this is Stripe, but this is also true of Visa, MasterCard, basically kind of every payment provider, which, this works great if you're going out to dinner and buying a meal for $100. You don't really mind the 30-cent fixed fee. But when the price of the item is $1, that's a big portion of the company's revenue, which is selling it to you. And so the widespread use of subscriptions are really a symptom of these transaction fees. So the business model for the New York Times is to give you this, extremely low introductory price, which they're actually losing a lot to fees on. They're billing you $4 at the end of the month for the first year. But you see at the bottom there, after the year, now it's $25 every month. So really the business model is like, get these people on a subscription. Hopefully we win them over or they forget. And then we can really start to make some real revenue without paying large transaction fees over time. So yeah, transaction fees, especially when you're talking about these small individual purchases, just really eliminate profit margin. So if we look at like a 10-cent purchase which I think, is like a reasonable per article price, something in that range. The company which is selling it to you is getting the 10 cents in revenue. They're paying 30 cents in a fixed fee, 1 cent in a variable fee, and that's a 21-cent loss per sale. So obviously that's economically impossible. That can't exist given the current payment schema. Whoops. Let's say that instead of 10 cents, the per article price is $1. So this is, you're going to have a lot more churn. Maybe people aren't willing to pay the $1 who are willing to pay the 10 cents. But now you're getting $1 in revenue, 30 cents in fixed fee, 3 cents in variable fee. Now you're actually seeing a profit of 67 cents, but you're losing 33% of your revenue to fees. So that's, a huge margin for whoever's selling the product, in this case, the article. So what's Elon talking about? How might Twitter implement this? One possible solution, and I'm going to kind of segment the two types of users. So we'll have Twitter Blue subscribers, the people who pay the monthly fee for premium Twitter, and then people who don't currently have a payment mechanism tied to Twitter. So for the Twitter Blue subscribers, one relatively straightforward way would be to batch transactions. So allow users to do this one-click purchase of articles, count up how many articles they read. At the end of the month, tack this onto their subscription bill. So if someone's reading 10 articles per month, and let's say like that 10 cents per article cost is the standard, at the end of the month, they owe $9. So 30 cents in fixed fee, 26 cents in variable fee, and now Twitter profits $8.44. This is like very close to what they have currently with just their current subscription, $8 at the end of the month cost, and they're losing about 6% to fees. For non-Twitter Blue subscribers, this is a little bit more tricky because these people don't already have a credit card on file. So now you need to get them to sign up, put their information down. And you're probably, the fact that you don't have this, big $8 buffer at the end to eat into that margin that you would lose to fees means that you probably have to have a large surcharge. So something like, reading 10 articles, the same user, maybe there's 100% surcharge, $2 at the end of the month. After fees, Twitter's seeing $1.64 in profit, but now we're looking at 18% loss to fees. So for a company the size of Twitter, this is hundreds of millions of dollars per year. So what's a better solution? What's more in line with kind of the vision for the internet that Unbounded Capital has been talking about? That would look more like true micropayments. So in this schema, Twitter could keep virtually 100% of the revenue, and solutions that leverage Bitcoin SV can provide this at Twitter scale today. So you can see the stark contrast with just the fixed fee of the per transaction price to process on the Bitcoin SV network being far less than 1/10 of a cent, such that it's virtually invisible. So this will feel like a cash transaction where there's no transaction fee per se, but it's electronic. So what are some of the advantages of this type of implementation? The main thing, obviously, savings. So Twitter would retain a major portion of the revenue that otherwise would be lost to transaction fees. Like I said, that's in the range of $100 million plus per year. It's also much more simple. So you don't need to build and maintain a credit system to track who's bought which articles per month and then bill them at the end of the month. You don't need to discriminate in pricing between Twitter Blue subscribers and other subscribers. You don't need to set de facto minimums on publishers. So we're talking about 10 cents per article, but maybe like in a true free market scenario, the market price for an article would be 1 cent. If you have this credit system, and your Twitter, you'd be kind of hesitant to let people price too low. But if you're paying true micropayments with these like minuscule fees, you can give them more flexibility to price their articles as they see fit. And then a major upgrade is the ability to easily split payments. And I'll touch on that a little bit more on the next slide. The last benefit is privacy. So if you get credit card information, you need to collect a bunch of personal information, put in your address, your full name. With the cash transaction, that's not necessary, and that includes digital cash. So it's much nicer for Twitter users. So here's a hypothetical world where Twitter is leveraging Handcash. Handcash is a Unbounded Capital portfolio company, which makes integrating micropayments into an app like Twitter extremely simple and is extremely scalable as well. They enable you to easily send payments as small or even less than a penny, and it's all handle based. So this will line up very well with how Twitter's already oriented. So, user at this name sends 5 cents to user at that name, and that's already how Handcash is set up. Like I mentioned in the last slide, you could split payments in real time. So let's say I'm on Twitter, I see a New York Times article that looks interesting. I click on it, one click, like Elon said, I pay 10 cents. And then behind the scenes, that 10 cents is split up. So maybe 20% goes to Twitter, 60% goes to the New York Times. What's interesting is you could also split it even further. So you could even pay a portion to like the author of that piece, which would maybe incentivize better journalism. And then really interesting is you could even send a portion to the tweeter whose feed I saw the post on initially. That person, if Zach tweets an article and I read it through his feed, he really promoted that. So giving him a small cut would be a good incentive to share good journalism, and also be a kind of a really novel implementation of micropayments. Like I said, there's no risk of chargeback, which is common with credit cards. So everything settles instantly. It's just like physical cash, but it is electronic. So that's a huge benefit. And then lastly, you could also denominate everything in local currency. So if you're a Twitter user in the US, USD, if you're in Europe, you can use euros. And those could all be stable coins that are built on top of Bitcoin SV, which is a product that Handcash and others in the Bitcoin SV space are already building to make very easy to integrate into applications like a Twitter. So what do we think will actually happen here? We're confident that the only path to Twitter's scale micropayment solutions is through companies like Handcash. That's why we're investing in them. We think this vision of the future of the internet is kind of a no-brainer. So companies that will enable that, we think, are extremely exciting for the next several decades of development online. So what do we think Twitter will do here in the next few weeks? I think what's most likely to start is a credit-based MVP, just for Twitter Blue subscribers. So kind of like what we outlined earlier, count up how many articles I click on, add it to my bill at the end of the month. You already have my credit card. This is a relatively straightforward way to get an MVP out for Elon. The problem here, of course, is that you have a pretty high percentage of your revenue lost to fees. So even if we're talking around like the 6%, which is what they probably currently see with just their normal subscriptions, that's a very large amount of money for Elon. So I think over time, this is going to incentivize exploring other options. And I think those other options will probably be blockchain based. Elon is kind of an ideal candidate to explore this type of thing since he has a micropayment background from PayPal. He's also very interested in blockchain technology. So I think like exploring Dogecoin would be a likely outcome when they do tiptoe into blockchain. The problem is that Dogecoin or virtually any other blockchain other than Bitcoin SV is going to hit scale ceilings. And those scale ceilings are going to result in higher transaction fees on the blockchain. And then you're kind of back to the initial problem of losing revenue to transaction fees. So I think ultimately where this ends up for Twitter or for a Twitter competitor and really kind of all sorts of online products is leveraging a scalable blockchain. I think roadmaps for companies like Handcash and others in the Unbounded Capital portfolio line up very nicely. The product at Handcash has developed a lot over the last couple of years. And should Twitter explore interest or explore this type of a solution in the 6 to 12 month timeline, I think that dovetails very nicely with how mature the Handcash product offering is and other similar products leveraging Bitcoin SV. So long term, I think the market is going to demand a solution which has this type of user experience, and that's going to require massive scale and extreme efficiency, which is core to the Unbounded Capital thesis of focusing on blockchains which deliver that. Today, we're confident that this is really only possible on Bitcoin SV. There are other companies that are exploring alternate layer 1 solutions like Aldea that we're watching closely. But long-term, a highly scalable and highly efficient blockchain, I think will be core to what Twitter will use for this type of a solution. And that's it. So happy to answer any questions. Just write them in chat or raise your hand and we'll get you unmuted.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. We'll give folks a second to write, but I have a couple questions for you if no one else jumps in a moment. So, what other companies do you think are most likely to follow this? Whether they're social media companies, but kind of big companies that everyone on the call would know, do you expect to start this process? Because I imagine it'll look like a similar process for everyone. It's not like someone's going to jump and go straight to micropayments. They'll probably start with a credit-based system, and then,
Right.
it'll take months or maybe even years to eventually arrive at like a Handcash or Handcash-like solution. But just curious where you see this going.
Yeah, I mean, I think the use case that got me interested in blockchain initially in 2017 was how a platform like YouTube could implement payments. The current monetization scheme on YouTube is just like really suboptimal for creators. So, a creator like PewDiePie, who has over 100 million subscribers, or MrBeast, they're getting an incredibly high amount of eyeballs on their videos, which is selling ads to Twitter. And oftentimes you'll read like, wow, look how much X YouTuber is making. And they are very high dollar numbers, but when you look at it relative to like what the advertising industry pays in TV for like the Super Bowl or something like that, they're being terribly underpaid. So I think even if it's just a subscription where YouTube viewers are supporting their content creators with like monthly payments and that's lower fee, or creating kind of like a pay per video mechanism, I think pay per blank is just a widely applicable way to pay for content online that is really a very intuitive way to start if you're just thinking like, how would I charge for X service? But it's been impossible given transaction fees. So I would definitely look at video. I think, music, we wrote an example in our ebook about a version of Spotify that leverages micropayments, which I think is also very exciting. So I think, yeah, a lot of this content, just the pay per X revolution.
Hey, Peter.
Hi, Zach. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for joining today.
Good. Well, thank you for giving this very timely update.
Yeah, of course.
Really well done, and I enjoyed meeting Handcash at your last in-person session that you hosted in Manhattan, which was terrific. So I'll give a shout out for that as well. I didn't hear what Dave said about the micropayments. He said the video industry, the music industry, and what other were those two primary?
I mean, I think it's applicable to like a whole host of industries. So there's also companies which currently exist today. If you were at the event, you probably also saw the Haste arcade guys. So
yes,
they're kind of doing exactly what I'm talking about with splitting payments, even at a greater scale. So you can play a game on Haste and pay 10 cents to play the game, and then you split that 10 cents 100 different ways and pay out the entire leaderboard. So I think, if you're starting if it's your first day on Earth and you explain the internet to somebody and you're like, how do you think this company monetizes this product? I think the answer would be like, well, people pay them for the thing that they're consuming. It's just kind of like an obvious way to do it. But we've kind of developed these like complex ways around it with subscriptions, or, basically you're always trying to avoid transaction fees, lump payments into like larger chunks to route around it. So a lot of the systems, or even worse, you're just like flooding the screen with ads, making the website unusable. And, it's a free product, but it's a bad user experience. So I think a lot of, I don't think those things are all going to go away, but I think the ability to introduce micropayments just opens up a lot.
And that's I've got a few questions. I hope you don't mind, Zach. I don't want to monopolize the time, but it's such a great topic.
Yeah, no, keep asking.
Number one on the music, Dave and Zach, anybody, either feel free to answer. We have the iTunes now, which is 99 cents per song. So how is the micropayments different than that, or how could that evolve, I guess is what I'm trying to understand based on your perspective? And again, just a short answer, because I've got a bunch of stuff I want to ask you.
I'll let Dave take this because he literally wrote the chapter on this in our kind of introduction in the book. So I'll let him give it briefly. But Peter, I know you've checked this out before, but for anyone listening, to have kind of a deeper dive into like micropayments, content broadly, I think that's our best resource on it. And I'll link to that in a moment.
Yeah, I think reference that for more specific numbers. That was written a few years ago. But yeah, basically, I think, Apple has a lot of leverage. So they negotiated a better price than 30 cents and 3%, obviously. But whatever they ended up with, they're losing a giant portion to fees for sure. I think, I haven't bought a song on iTunes in a long time. I think the whole industry's kind of shifted towards streaming and paying a monthly subscription. So I think that that's helped reduce the percentage of the revenue lost to fees. But whatever it is, it's still quite large. So yeah, I think like kind of what we explain in the chapter about.
Well, yeah, but give me a summary. So if I pay 99 cents for a song, what is the next evolution with the micropayments on something like that? Or I mean, is it an apples to apples, or is it completely different?
The vision that we described in the piece is more I'm paying an artist directly. The service that would, so Spotify is great at recommending music. So that's a front end on this whole back end of like music that the artist owns and sells directly to me. So the service of the front end suggesting a song to me, they would be happy to pay basically a referral fee to the front end. So like I'm paying you, the music artist, and 10% is going to Spotify or whatever the company is, which is making a nice interface for it. That's kind of the vision that I picture, which just gives a lot more power to the artist.
Okay, got it. That's terrific. And it also cuts out the intermediary, which is Apple, and goes straight to the artist. Is that your point also, Dave?
It cuts out intermediaries unless they're providing a big value add. So I would argue that Spotify adds a huge value in their curation of music. So yeah, there would just be a lot more competition. If Spotify is overcharging, just move to a different provider, a different front end, and there's going to be a competitive market to provide the best curation at the lowest price.
Okay. And then the other question I have is, in the example you gave about Twitter and Elon Musk, going to micropayments, what are the considerations that they're going to go through to pick that platform, whether it be, BSV and Handcash or something else? I mean, how is that going to unfold? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, I wish I knew the answer for sure, but I would say it's probably an evolution. So I think like what Elon hinted at was an MVP. So I think they do the easiest possible thing, which is like this internal credit system, which is relatively straightforward. I think like the incentive to explore blockchain is enormous. So they'll do that, and I think they'll make their decision the way a lot of people make decisions. They'll pick what's most popular. And then what will eventually sour them on that is it just not working. So I think basically any blockchain outside of Bitcoin SV, if you tried to build this on at Twitter scale, it's going to kind of go up in flames instantly just because these blockchains aren't scalable. So then the main criteria will be, hey, is there a product which scales? And then I think you're willing to do a little bit more work and, do a little bit more research and not pick from the top of the popularity bucket, but use something that actually works like Handcash or something that's powered by a scalable infrastructure. Thanks for the questions, Peter.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions here? We got more from Peter? Okay, I'll ask him to unmute.
Keep it going.
Sorry about that. I was interrupted again, so I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
So Dave, what was the answer again? Somebody was talking to me while you were answering, and I apologize.
It was, I think they'll choose the most popular blockchain, or like, whatever that is. So like Ethereum is a very popular blockchain.
Right.
I think that they would go with an option like that. And then any success that they had would kind of, by definition, create the problem of it not working because those systems just aren't scalable. So I think,
and also the cost of those systems is prohibitive, right?
Right. So that's how I would measure. Like the main KPI for like, is this not scalable? Would be like, do the transaction fees skyrocket with usage? So with Ethereum, for sure, that's the case. So Ethereum is so unscalable, it might not even like make the list. But I think like a Solana or a lot of these like next gen ETH killer blockchains would be popular. Those haven't been like tested at Twitter scale. So I think, well before they got to Twitter scale, they would hit major issues. And then Twitter would have like this major engineering challenge, or they could just use a thing that works that, wasn't as obvious of a choice to start. So I think Handcash, other companies that leverage Bitcoin SV, which scales, would be kind of no-brainer solutions.
Yeah, no, right. I agree. I'm just wondering, how that decision process might work. And obviously we're all guessing, but, and hoping, that it's Handcash
I mean, you hope,
and BSV.
You hope they just like start with the right solution. I think that'd be a very optimistic prediction for me to make. It's possible, but it would save them a lot of time and money and their users a lot of headache as the product broke in real time. But I think
it's unlikely that's going to, they're going to need to see a number of kind of more medium-sized companies that are on the decision makers' radar do that first. But, something we've seen, so if you've been on these webinars before, which, most people that are here are, one of our strongest portfolio companies, Handcash. They, when they were just getting first started, leveraged some of their relationships in Barcelona and Madrid. The founders are Spanish, to see if they can get some of the more, bigger Spanish papers, kind of more local newspapers where they had some connections to get to use micropayments. And that was always kind of a dead end for them until now. So the newspapers actually kind of proactively started conversations again with Handcash as a result of this Elon Musk news. So we're definitely seeing lots of more traction for not just Handcash, but a few of our other portfolio companies as a result of this. So there's some pretty big ripple effects, but they'll take, months to then implement and get customers. And then, will take some more time for then the people at these much larger orgs to see it. But yeah, there's certainly an optimistic scenario where you have a really smart, technical person at Twitter that's like, hey, I want to be able to charge 10 cents now and have that make sense. And I think they'll determine that, solutions like Handcash are really the only game in town to really maximize.
Yeah, I would imagine, Zach, that they're going to have to do some kind of technical feasibility and so forth. And so there'll be some kind of objective ranking.
Sure. We've just seen that many, many times, primarily by like banks and financial institutions, and they end up using, just the worst possible solution. So my confidence for what people at large organizations can determine in terms of like which blockchains can work to support their vision isn't very high. You've seen JP Morgan Chase that put over $1 billion of R&D into a private blockchain solution based off of Ethereum, and then fire sold that for, maybe not even pennies on the dollar, and aren't using that in any meaningful way anymore. So, there's just unfortunately not been a lot of smart blockchain adoption at the enterprise level yet, but we're confident that will change over time.
It's also true that like people don't think of blockchains right off the bat for micropayments, because they think mistakenly blockchains are like great, but they're terrible at small payments, which is just like total opposite of reality. So I do think like for a lot of people, if you're like an engineer at Twitter, your first thought for this problem isn't blockchain, but like upon further investigation, I think that'll just become much clearer. But yeah, it'll take kind of a counterintuitive approach, since the whole space has been kind of 180 degrees wrong on the topic of blockchains and efficiency.
Okay, and the last question I'll ask, and it's a little bit outside of the micropayments, but since you're focusing on Twitter and Elon Musk, I think another thing he said, and I'm just curious, very summary answer, he wants to make an all-in-one offering through Twitter, not only micropayments, but all sorts of other stuff, and kind of a go-to site like Facebook, or he wants to compete with these all-in-one kind of things. I'm just wondering, in the BSV world, in your portfolio, what other companies might play in that? And again, if it's an inappropriate question, then we can move on.
No, I mean, I think the main company would be Handcash, so for a variety of different product offerings, for involving micropayments, using the Handcash SDK could make sense, even if it's, not all just the same, super straightforward. I want to send little payments to another person, or I want to process payments. You have a lot of different innovative ways companies are using the Handcash SDK now, not just for the fairly simple, just processing payments or sending people money. So I do think Handcash would likely be the sole beneficiary of at least like Twitter adopting scalable blockchain infrastructure to make a bunch of things happen. There's always a chance of something else. But Dave, maybe if there's another portfolio company I'm missing, but I think it would just be Handcash.
Yeah, when I hear the everything app, my mind immediately goes to identity, which the current internet doesn't do a great job with identity. We're very fragmented. We have our identities in different applications. I think a big promise of the Web3 vision is this identity where you bring your wallet's attached, so that's Handcash. Now your funds are attached to you, but also your stuff is part of your identity. So I'll plug another company that Jack Lasky, the former partner at Unbounded Capital, and I co-founded, Asset Layer, which is making it very easy for companies to create essentially NFTs and manage them. And it's all focused on interoperability across applications. So that would be, I think, a core component of the identity element, which I think I can't picture what an everything app looks like without kind of a next gen approach to an identity solution. So I think, yeah, NFTs and payments are pretty core to that.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Whoops, sorry. Thank you, Peter. Any other takers here for questions for Dave and I? And this could be broader than just this Elon micropayment update. So I have a DM here. So Dave, this is for you. Well, sorry, I'm just going to rephrase this. Are we seeing competitors to Handcash out there? Because I think this is kind of coming from we've done a lot of webinars. We're talking about Handcash all the time, but we have just made this one investment there. So are we seeing a lot of competition, both in our deal pipeline or competition to Handcash now? And why aren't we investing in more things that are doing this if this is such a big market that now has this traction?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think in a sense we're seeing more competition in that people are identifying that opportunity as a very big opportunity, which, like I said, wasn't always the case for blockchain companies, which mistakenly thought blockchains couldn't deliver that. So we're seeing a lot of companies which are using very similar messaging, I would say, but they're building on technology that's just fundamentally unscalable. So they're kind of in the same boat as a lot of the other companies, where their success, should they achieve it, is their own demise, because if they get a bunch of customers and generate a bunch of demand, they're going to grind the underlying blockchain to a halt, which makes them not attractive investments, because ultimately I think for the success they would have to find that success and then move over, and hopefully that re-architecting isn't very complicated, and then they're kind of just like Handcash but a few years behind. So yeah, I think it's a relatively bullish sign for Handcash that they're seeing more competition, but from people which kind of have some foundational problems, which will give them trouble should they find success. I don't know how you'd answer that, though. I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't think I have too much to add there. One, I'm just going to put in a link here. I think we've chatted about them before on the webinar. We've chatted a bunch internally. So David Marcus, former head of crypto for Meta, he started a company called Lightspark, which is basically aiming to do very similar messaging to what Handcash is doing, but he raised some crazy 9-figure round a couple months ago. Still relatively early stage for the business. So the technology that he has chosen to enable streaming money and move money around on the internet is the Lightning Network, which isn't a blockchain and doesn't really have a chance of scaling. One of the Unbounded partners on the investment committee, Joshua Hensley, he's written a piece that Dave and I helped work on called "Why the Lightning Network Doesn't Work." So kind of similar to what Dave was talking about. Definitely a lot of money, a lot of interest, a lot of big, what are considered tier 1 Silicon Valley venture capital firms that are excited about this company. but if you kind of look under the hood, we're not seeing actually a real viable chance of being able to actualize this vision because of the technology. But it's definitely very validating, I think, for not just Handcash, but for other companies trying to go about this in a smart way.
Yeah, I forgot about Lightspark. Since we looked at them, their product is probably suffering due to the skyrocketing transaction fees on BTC. So when we wrote that piece about why Lightning doesn't work, it's kind of like 1,000 times more dire now, given some of these other developments on BTC, which is, indicative of why it's kind of flawed from the jump. I think Peter might have another question. Looks like a new hand raise.
In terms of Handcash, what customer and what volumes have they achieved, to date that, you're impressed with, or that, you could cite as, the scalability and robustness of the.
Well, Dave, through Asset Layer,
platform.
you work with them very directly. So,
yeah, so Handcash does all the key management for Asset Layer's NFTs, which, one of our applications, which is using Asset Layer to issue NFTs, has over 5 million NFTs live, all of which users don't pay any transaction fees on. And we're updating those, sending those, querying those, tens of millions of times just through normal gameplay. And that's cheap enough for Handcash where, the bill, it's like normal SaaS pricing. So it's not, if you did it on Ethereum, we would have had a bill of some 9-figure amount by now. And we've had no technical constraints there. It's just about like growing demand in a normal kind of business practice way, but all the technical stuff works great.
Yeah, there's a number of games that, use Handcash where they've, said they didn't even imagine this thing was even possible to do in a cost efficient way. And that kind of similar delta of like, they're able to do it for hundreds of dollars, maybe a couple thousand, and it would be literally like over 100 million on Ethereum, or like millions on other solutions. It just allows for kind of new business models. And I think this is very bullish for the space as a whole, that Twitter is talking about micropayments per article payments. Really, I think those that are going to be leveraging this most are those that need it. So with a company like Asset Layer, their product, like, it could literally not exist without Handcash or something like it. It's not just saving them money. It couldn't exist without it. So I think we're going to continue to see adoption of kind of more innovative ways of providing value for people that involve much smaller increments of money, such that, for them, it's like a literal need. It's not just a gross profit driver by having it. And then I think from there, we'll see it kind of more to companies that just want to save money rather than absolutely require it to be able to have this product work.
Yeah, I would say there's like two buckets that are kind of the same thing, but coming from a different angle. So there's like efficient payments and micropayments. And micropayments are only possible with efficient payments, but you'll see all these new business models where you're sending pennies around with like Paste Arcade, for example. But then there's just efficient payments. So, charging somebody $5, but you don't want to spend 30 cents and 3% on that. It's fundamentally the same technology. Handcash delivers both, but they're kind of slightly different categories almost. But yeah, our Handcash bill is, far lower than our AWS bill, for sure.
Okay, well, thank you, Peter. Maybe one last call for questions from someone else on the call today. Well, okay. Thank you so much today, everyone, for joining another Unbounded Capital webinar. As always, we'll keep you posted at least a week in advance what the next topic is. You have kind of your calendar invites for the rest of our webinars until the end of the year, and looking forward to the next one, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.